want to talk today about a story that Bruce read very briefly, and it may have seemed like a little bit of a cliffhanger there. So I want to read it to you again really quick. This story is in John chapter 9, if you want to follow along with me. This is John chapter 9, and I'm starting right up here in the top at verse 1. As he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." Does anyone know what happens with the rest of this story? Jesus heals him. That's right, Jesus heals him, kind of in a weird way. If you skip through some verses here, still in John chapter 9, we end down here where people are asking him what happened. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" This is the guy we know who's poor because he's blind and sits on the side of the road. Some said, "It is he." Yeah, it's the guy we know. Others said, "No, but maybe it's someone kind of like him." Other people said, "No way, this can't be the same guy. This isn't the same blind guy that we've known this whole time." So they said to him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." Then they did something kind of interesting. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. These people heard that some miracle worker had healed their friend. So naturally, they brought him to church and said, "How did this happen?" And so as the blind man's friends bring him to church, to the Pharisees, here's what the Pharisees say. The Pharisees asked him again how he received his sight. And the man explains again. I'm sure he's a little tired at this point. He says, "Look, I just told all my friends the same story. No one seems to believe me, but here we go. He put mud on my eyes." It was crazy. It was pretty weird. But it worked, because the blind man says, "And I washed, and I see." It's about as simply as you can put it. Some of the Pharisees said, get this, "This man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath." And others said, "How can a man who is a sinner do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him since he has opened your eyes?" He said, "He is a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son. We know that he was born blind, but how he sees, we don't know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." Are you seeing the runaround that everyone is giving this man here? It seems like a simple story at first, but I think that there's a reason that John unpacks this story for so long. Because John wants us to come back to the start of this story. John wants us to know what really happened here. Let's actually get down to the bottom of this. How was this man actually healed? At our church, we have a vision statement that says, we want to see hurting people restored to wholeness in Jesus Christ. We want people to be healed, and we know how that works. People are healed by Jesus. And so often, we pretend like we don't know how it works. Kind of like the Pharisees in this story. Maybe kind of like the man's friends in this story. maybe a little bit like the man's parents in this story. We keep asking these questions. How can we possibly change our lives? How can we possibly love our friends? How can we possibly make healthy relationships with the people around us? How can we heal what's broken? And the answer, very simply, is Jesus. That's what Jesus came for. Jesus came to heal the things that are broken. And so I want to go back to these first couple verses where Jesus says exactly how this works. Jesus answered, "It was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him." Jesus immediately dismisses all the speculation that's going to come for the rest of that chapter, because Jesus says it's not about the sin. It's not about who did what. It's not about who's at fault here. It's about the work of God being displayed in this man. We've been talking for the past 3 weeks about our church and what it means to be a church, what it means to be a church that sees hurting people restored to wholeness. And I think very simply, it comes down to one thing. If we're going to be a church where people are restored to wholeness in Jesus Christ, we have to trust. We have to trust in 2 ways. First of all, we have to trust God. We have to believe Jesus when he says that he can heal us. We have to believe him when he says that he already came to heal us. And we have to believe him when he says it's not about our sin. When Jesus says our sin isn't the focus here, that the works of God living out in you are the focus here, we got to believe that. We have to trust that that's what God can do in our lives. And also we have to trust each other. Because if we believe that we're going to be this group of people that is willing to help in that healing process, to help heal people through Jesus, we have to be able to open up to each other, to trust each other, to see what's going on in our lives that needs to be healed. And so before we go into our series about discipleship for the next couple weeks, I want to take some time today as a church just to talk about what's going on in our lives, just to see where we're at as a church. Let's take some time to kind of step back from all the learning we've been doing and take inventory of where we're at, how we're feeling, what our lives look like right now. And I want to talk about that with 3 really simple questions. And right now, I want you guys to pair up in groups of maybe 2 or 3. If you see someone sitting alone, please pull them into your group. Feel free to just pair up with the person you came with or people you feel comfortable talking to, because I want you to be able to really talk through these questions. But I also want you to know that you can be as deep and personal with your responses to these questions as you want, or you can be as casual with these responses as you want to. So let's start off with our first question. Our first question is this. I want you to talk to each other very simply just about what's going well. What things are going well in your life? And we'll talk about that for a couple minutes, and then I'll come back up and talk about the next question. So, what's going well for you? So is everybody doing pretty well? Are things going well? Everybody looks pretty positive. Good, good. I'm glad to see so many things going well. So this next question, I just want to say, these people, this church, this is a great place for you to be. This is a safe place to open up, and I want you guys to know you can feel comfortable talking to everyone here. So the next question is, where are you hurting? What I really want to talk about in these groups is what things are we struggling with right now? What's tough for us in life right now? And let's get real about what's actually going on in our lives. What are we really struggling with? So let's talk about where are you hurting right now? So I have one last question I want to ask you. I think that in our groups, we've definitely found some spots that we're hurting, right? We've definitely identified some places in our lives that we're really struggling with, some things that are hurting us that we're trying to deal with. Maybe we don't know what to do. So this last question I want to ask is, where is God working? And this question also could be, do you see God working? Do you see God working somewhere in your life? And if not, where do you not see God working in your life that you think God should be working in your life? So where do you see God working right now? Or do you see God working right now? Let's talk about that in our group. going to have a time of prayer to kind of pray over what we talked about. So now that we've kind of talked through some things as a church, we've opened up, we've connected with each other a little bit. We've talked about some places we're hurting. We've talked about some things that are going really well. And we've talked about some ways that God is working through all of that. And so I'd just like to close out this time of discussion right now with the time of prayer. So if you want to turn back to your group and just take some time to pray about the things that you've been talking about, the things that you've been sharing. So let's take a moment to pray.